Welcome to Eventful Endeavors, secrets to crafting the perfect celebration. If you're planning an event and looking for useful tips from industry experts, you're in the right place. So get ready to take some notes and we'll dive right in. This is Eventful Endeavors. Hello, everybody. This is Mike Sherman with Felix and Fingers Dueling Pianos here with another exciting episode of Eventful Endeavors, where we will be talking about all things events and weddings and parties and anything you might think of. Today, I'm here with a very special guest, Sholeh Munion. She's been working in the event industry for 20 years. She's planned massive trade shows, corporate association meetings, nonprofit galas, international and diplomatic events, weddings, social events. She's a certified meeting professional. She takes her work very seriously while also bringing joy to the planning process for clients. A great part of the work of a planner is being a problem solver, combined with the knowledge of how to connect with people, and that is her passion and who she is to her core. A people person with an eye for detail and a brain for logistics. She values community, supporting other small businesses, specifically minority and women-owned business, and she believes in lifting other people up. Social justice and empathy are the core of who she is. Aside from that, she's visited 45 of the 50 United States, 6 countries, including living in one of them for 18 months. Oh, my goodness. And the familiarity and comfort with the international nature of the events industry has enabled her to adjust to any situation she's in. She reads at least 2 books a week. She travels. She spends time with her friends, her family. She loves baking, being in nature, mentoring, volunteering. And she lives with her husband and her 2 daughters right here in Chicago, Illinois, where I am also based. So thank you so much for joining us today. How did I do? Did I get your bio pretty accurate?
It was incredible, and I think that was probably the best version I've heard, so I appreciate it.
Great. Great. Well, thank you. And I'm so glad you're here to join us today. We worked together on a wedding last year, and I was so glad to have you reach out about chatting with us on the podcast. So tell me a little bit first, kind of before we get too far into it. I'm just so curious about which country you lived in for 18 months. That's what I'm.
I actually lived in Israel. I
Oh,
was working at an international event there, and I needed to be there on site, and then I basically got to travel around as well. So I went to Turkey. I've been to Greece. I've been to China. I've kind of just traveled as much as I possibly can. I want to do more.
yeah.
My goal is to take my kids as many places as I can, and they're already starting their domestic travel. So next is
Oh,
international.
that's amazing. Yeah, my I have a 8-year-old. Well, he's 8 this Friday. We just went to Ireland and London and Amsterdam this year. It was my first time in Europe actually ever too, but it was just really cool to get to show him that and just see these different cultures. And so we're very excited to do it again somewhere else. So yeah,
It's fun.
so excited. And my other totally unevent related question, just because I'm kind of a nerd like that, is what have you read recently? You say you read a lot of books. What's kind of what are a couple either recommendations or just ones that you've recently been listening to or reading?
So I think the most impactful book that I think all event professionals actually should read is called The Art of Gathering by Priya Parker. And I actually have it sitting here right next to me on my desk. It's such a great kind of underlying psychology of events, and it's not just for events people. It's written really, I think, with a broader audience, but I think it's a really good study of how to think more deeply about events. Why do we host events? What's the purpose? And then when you dig down into the purpose, you can actually um, create an experience for the guests that is meaningful to each person. It's a fascinating book, and I highly recommend. It's not a very thick book, but it's one of those that I think everyone should read.
Awesome. No, that's great. Thank you so much for the recommendation and the you were like ready with that answer. There was not a planned question or anything. So great. Awesome. Well, so now tell me a little bit, just as far as your event planning goes, what kind of percentage of your work is in like the corporate world versus like weddings versus maybe any other type of event you do? So what's kind of your
It's
percentage?
shifted over the years, right?
Okay.
So when I started out, I was very much in the nonprofit sector. I did a lot of association events, which is a whole world of its own. I worked for one of the largest association management companies in the world, and so I got to do really cool trade shows, conventions, meetings. There was a lot of strategy, a lot of project management, working with large groups of planning teams. And so I had kind of a lot of volume in a very short amount of time early in my career. And it was exhausting and led to a bit of burnout, but it was some of the best training I could have ever received.
Yeah.
So that's something that I really think is important, is that on-site kind of hands-on learning and being around other planners and event professionals. I learned so much from my fellow industry folks, and kind of learned how to leverage the event industry in a way that I don't think I would have on my own. So that was really powerful, and that was, probably 90% of my job, right? I was working full time, and on the side, I was doing weddings and social events because when you're the only event planner that people know, you're gonna get hired to do all sorts of things.
Right.
So I would do a lot of those types of things on the side, and when I had my first daughter, I actually kind of flipped the percentage of what I was working on, and I moved over into more weddings, mostly because it fit my schedule better, and
Yeah.
I was wanting to kind of change the kind of corporate feel of my work. In addition, I was as soon as I left my full-time job, I was hired by a friend who ran a media company to do a conference for journalists. And that was my first kind of big on my own conference of that nature. And that goes into a whole thing of like family friendly event policies. They had caretakers on site. They were really family friendly.
Oh,
I
yeah.
brought my baby to board meetings. And it was kind of a glimpse of what we could have if we really worked on it.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, that's amazing. That sounds really cool. Well, let's kind of start then on that more like corporate side where you said you kind of had more of that, all that, galas and whatnot that you used to do a lot more of. Just as far as speaking of like the corporate work, that sort of thing, what are some on-site challenges that you experienced, dealing just in that world? Because it's such a different world than the wedding world, obviously, with the whole
Yes.
other challenges.
Yes. So I would say that a big kind of, I think, well, there's two main ones that I've noticed. One of the first ones is the short-term nature of that work. A lot of the time, corporate events and even nonprofits have shorter time turnaround times for
Yeah.
things, and decisions are made very quickly, and things change very quickly. So you might be starting a general session even on site, and the executive director comes over and says, "We need to remove 10 rounds and 100 chairs from this room right now."
Now.
And there's 1,000 people are about to walk into the room, and you're working at a hotel, right? And so, how do you handle that with grace and also with strength to say back to somebody, "Hey, I think this is a bad idea. I really want to support you with this. However, let's figure out a different way to do it so that we don't have tables rolling out while guests are walking in, which is A, a safety hazard, and B, it doesn't look great."
Mm-hmm.
And so being able to have those difficult conversations in the heat of a moment, I think is one of the most challenging and also best skills that you can learn for working with corporate and nonprofit clients, because that pressure cooker, a lot of folks aren't used to working in that. And as event professionals, we're like, "Oh, yeah, this is normal." But the vast majority of people are not accustomed to this, and it can make them very anxious, very frustrated, very concerned about their event. And we have to be kind and also firm so that we make sure that the event goes off well.
Yeah. Well, and that's what's, great about, I'm sure, working with somebody like you is there is a level of trust that is instilled immediately. So it's like you feel like you have that authority to say, we really should do it this way. It's like, that's kind of my thing too, is like, I'm not going to force you to do what I want, but I'm sure as heck going to give you my opinion if I think it's the wrong idea. Then, you're still the boss, but I'm here because I'm the expert. So.
Yeah, yeah. And that allows people to also feel like they have a partner in the process. Like, our job is to be their partner. It's not to tell them what to do. It's not to just be railroaded and not listen to it all. I think it's really, you see that as a partnership, and if you establish that from the beginning, it makes the whole process a lot easier.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it's a whole different type of stress that comes with those sorts of things. Because even when we put together, corporate shows or fundraisers, a lot of it's like a big process before they even book us, and then they book us, and it's like ready to roll, and we're going in like 2 weeks or a month or something. Whereas your weddings, they're signed on the dotted line 18 months out sometimes, and then it's like, well, now what do we do? So it's a whole different world. Which it's like, which I don't know. I like having experience in both.
Yeah, no, and to answer your question from earlier about right now, my business is about 50-50. So
Okay.
I'm doing, kind of a mix of corporate, gala, and then weddings. And it's a really nice kind of balance because I get to use my brain in different ways, which I think is really fun.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's, kind of similar with us. We used to do a lot more weddings. We still do a lot of weddings, don't get me wrong, but now we've just started doing more of the corporate stuff, more fundraisers, that sort of thing. And it just selfishly as a performer, it's fun because you don't really get sick of it. It's like if I was just doing weddings, and if I'm just doing the same kind of shows over and over, but it's like every week I'm like looking at my calendar. I'm like, what do we got today? Oh, we got a fundraiser, we got a public show, we got a wedding. I never get sick of it. So it's fun, which I'm sure you can empathize with as well. Just going to all
Yes.
the events. Oh my gosh. Well, then let's kind of jump into the world of weddings. One thing I always like to kind of ask people to start off is just sort of curiosity. What are kind of some trends that you've seen kind of picking up in the last year or two? Or similarly, what are some things that you see that have kind of gone by the wayside maybe over the last 5, 10 years? I mean, I certainly have thoughts on it too, but I always like to ask, where are we in the wedding world right now?
I think there's the normal answers like we're seeing less garter tosses and bouquet tosses, right? And we all know these kinds of things
Yeah.
are coming in and out, or we're seeing certain kinds of cakes come in and certain kinds of, colors and all of that. But
Mm-hmm.
I actually want to shift away from that a little bit and think about what I'm seeing in terms of trends with event professionals actually spending a lot more time thinking about their craft. Because what it does is it impacts the wedding experience so greatly. And I'm seeing a lot more couples choosing to work with professionals and making an effort to find vendors who are really at the top of their game. And it doesn't mean that they're necessarily paying top dollar or luxury prices, right? But they're reaching out to people who truly are interested in growth, in education, in collaboration. It's something that's super important to me. And so when I have couples reach out to me, a big reason why they book is because they're looking for that professional level of experience. I've got a lot of couples who work, they are professionals, they work in whatever field they're in, but they see the value in that. And so they're trying to find that level of experience with their vendors. And so if we are building a culture of collaboration with each other as vendors, we have the people that we can recommend. We have that understanding of who's going to give them that experience that they're looking for. And I think that the couples are really savvy. Like they're trying to find that experience, and maybe they've seen it at their friend's wedding, or they did a corporate event and they want some people who can have that level of expertise. And
Yeah.
so, maybe their company or their job or something. I actually had a couple who hired me, and she was actually planning events for her job. And she
Oh,
was like,
nice.
no, I need a professional event planner. Like I can't do this,
Mm-hmm.
by myself. And I love that she recognized that. And so our industry thrives when everyone does well, right? There's kind of this, we have to think about the future of our industry, especially those of us who've been doing this a little bit longer. I think we have a responsibility to mentor, to be a resource, to take 5 minutes out of our day, take 10 minutes out of our day, have a quick Zoom call with somebody who's up and coming, and support and help them. And it doesn't have to be in the same field, right? Like I talk to people who aren't just event planners. I've started doing retreats with other event planners to kind of help us level up our businesses and make sure that we're really providing the service that we need to do. And that I think is a trend that can only help. And because our industry is so unregulated, there's no real training for most people. There's
No.
not really clear paths, career paths. And so anything we can do to support that, I think then becomes a trend of our couples being able to have resources available to them that maybe they wouldn't have had in the past. So
Mm-hmm.
that's something that I'm excited about.
Yeah. Oh, no, that's amazing. It's such a great answer. What to you is the best way to kind of find these trusted, is it like looking at reviews? Is it looking for referrals? With me, it's always like ask your other vendors who their top vendors are. Like that's a smart thing in my opinion. Do you have any other kind of thoughts on that?
Yeah, that would be my first recommendation too. I feel like, venues is where a lot of people start, right? And that's why
Mm-hmm.
so many vendors are so interested in getting on the venue list. But I think that there's a lot of untapped resources. For example, I as a planner may not have dates available for a couple, but it's shocking to me how few people used to ask me for recommendation for another planner.
Yeah.
And maybe they think that it's competition or something, but I'm like, well, if I don't have your date available, so I've actually created a template where I have, depending on kind of their style, where they're located, all
Mm-hmm.
that, I might recommend certain planner friends of mine and say, hey, I'm not available on your date, but I hear of 3 people that I think you might want to reach out to kind of, because if they got to me and they like my style, they'll probably like these other folks, right? And so I feel that that's kind of something that's actually something we should be doing more of, is offering those alternatives so that people are at least going to our trusted, network. Um, I think I think people think that maybe if they ask their photographer for a planner recommendation, they're like, oh, I don't know if they'll have somebody. But like, we all work with people.
Yeah.
We've all had experiences, good and bad. So I think that that's obviously the first place. And then, I have kind of an issue with reviews because I think they're great and I think you should definitely look for reviews. And if there aren't any, then, rethink it.
Hmm.
But also, a lot of people are really afraid to share their negative experiences.
Hmm.
They're afraid it's going to come back on them, like as couples, especially in the wedding industry. And so I feel like sometimes there's not as much honesty as there should be.
Sure.
So it's a challenge. I would say even if you don't have vendors booked, you can also reach out to folks that you think might be a great resource. As a couple, you say, oh, you know what? It looks like this photographer's worked at a bunch of different places. I'm not actually hiring them for my wedding, but I'm going to reach out to them and see if they have any recommendations because maybe they're out of my price point, but they probably know some really good planners,
Yeah.
or they probably know a really good band. So that's something where I'm like, I think it's okay to reach out, and not everyone's going to be responsive. Everyone's busy, but it's worth a shot. And I think at the end of the day, you need to have a video interview or in-person interview as a couple and say, are we really clicking with this person? And if you don't
Hmm.
click with them, you don't need to move forward. You just need to write back and say, thank you so much for your time. We've decided to go in a different direction. Good luck, and move on to the next one.
Oh, yeah. No, I love that. Yeah. I mean,
It goes both ways.
oh, for sure. I mean, we've certainly had times when I mean, very rarely, but we've just been like, just not a good fit, even from our side, so something, and it is important. The relationship's important. I mean, it's certainly as far as, a planner goes. I mean, it's like you're going to be working very closely with this person. You want to make sure your personalities click a little bit, no matter how good or bad anyone is. It's so key. So that's awesome. Great. Well, now that we're kind of jumping into the wedding world, obviously most weddings are going to go flawlessly and perfectly, and everyone's going to have a great time and leave, feeling wonderful. But any situations that have happened at weddings that like you were not expecting, what like some kind of curveballs that came your way, maybe how you dealt with them? Talk to me about that.
Yeah. I mean, we all have those stories, right? I can't tell you how many times I've sewn a bustle or sat behind a head table and fixed a dress or, what have you. I think one of the ones that really sticks out in my mind was I had a New Year's Eve wedding a few years back, and this bride had a gorgeous long train on her dress, and they went and took photos before the ceremony and reception, which was all at one venue. And I'm at the reception venue getting set up, and she comes in an hour early from her photos, and she's in tears, and the bottom of her train is completely covered in Chicago snow slush,
Oh, yeah.
gray muck. And I just look at her, and she's like, I can't. I haven't even had my ceremony yet. And so I take her into the venue bathroom and we hike her dress up into the sink, and I spend 30 minutes scrubbing out the bottom of her sink with cold water, no soap, because that
Right.
can leave a soap ring,
Mm-hmm.
and scrubbed out the dress, and it was beautiful. We got hair dryers from the hotel and blow dried the bottom of her dress, and she went into her ceremony, and nobody had any idea that her dress had been covered in gray slush an hour earlier.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
that's one of those that you're like, oh, now I tell my couples who have these kind of winter weddings or weddings where the weather's a little bad, I'm like, you know what? Take a blanket with you, take a white sheet, take something to put under your dress if you really want those dramatic
Right.
shots. And make sure that you are thinking through what that looks like, and talking to your photographer and talking to your wedding party and making sure that you're, set up for success. But those are all learning things, right? These are things that you only learn when you've been doing this for a long time. And so that's kind of one of my fun little stories that we saved the day a little bit, but it was rough.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm sure she never will forget that for the rest of her life, too.
I
You
won't either.
saved her. Oh, that's amazing. That's such a great story. Well, I'm glad. Yeah, and I'm glad I'm glad you couldn't tell. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was great.
All right. Well, so now, if someone's planning their wedding, just like getting started, they got engaged last week. I mean, what's the first thing they do? It's like, what are they looking for? What should be their plan over the first couple of months?
That is a great question. I think that there's a lot, we can't expect our couples to know what they don't know. And I think that a lot of us get sometimes, we've been doing it for a while and we get a little bit like, oh, why did they call me earlier? But like, people get to a certain point and they're like, oh, I should have reached out to the band 6 months ago and now I'm panicking because I don't have that figured out. Or they book a band first and then don't realize that their venue is it's going to be really hard to accommodate that space, right? And
Yeah.
so I think that the first thing they need to do is sit down with their budget, because that is something that a lot of people, I can't tell you how many times they come to me and they've got a general number, but they have no idea how much things cost.
Hmm.
And sitting down and thinking about what can we really afford, what's really important to us, prioritizing, right? You don't even have to have all the numbers figured out. That's our job, right? We sit down as a planner and say, okay, this is how much this is probably going to cost, etc. But if you come to event professionals with clear ideas of this is what's important, this is not, we can help mold that as professionals, right? We can say, from my experience, these are the kinds of musicians you might want to have. These are the kinds of photographers. You want light and airy, you want dark and moody, whatever. So I would say a lot of people think that they don't need a planner because they can do most of the work themselves. And what they don't realize is how much you can do with the power of a planner behind you. You can have such a better experience just with a coordination package, right? Where you're working with someone a year and a half out, and you're locking in your timeline and your vendors and getting recommendations for solid people and learning what are the little tips and tricks to save money on certain areas. So that's a place where I always say you don't need to wait until 3 months before your wedding. If your budget's a little lower and you need somebody to work with you, there are so many planners who have the package that will help each couple with what they specifically need. And if a planner isn't flexible and doesn't have that service for you that you need, go find somebody else, because
Yeah.
I guarantee you there's so many of us that want to help, and we have those resources. We've had all that massive experience where we can say, hey, I'm going to save you a lot of time and energy and money on this, and the money that you invest in your planner will then come back tenfold in your experience and in obviously like your budget.
Yeah.
So that's a place where I say that there's navigating the challenges of wedding planning. You don't need to go all or nothing. There's definitely an in between, and I think that's something that I think more couples need to know, is to use us as a resource and see us as kind of like that trained mountain guide, right? Like, you're not going to climb a mountain not knowing the path, not having done your research. Well, hopefully you won't. But if you don't have that knowledge, you need to hire someone who does, and that's our job.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't think I've ever done a wedding where someone had, a great planner who didn't seem more relaxed and calm at the end of the day. I mean, at the beginning of the day, just, able to enjoy everything a lot more. So I definitely see the benefit of it. I mean, and in this world of Pinterest and TikTok and social media, I mean, it is easy to think, oh, I can just do this. But I mean, speaking from somebody who's done hundreds and hundreds of weddings, it makes a huge difference. And like you said, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if you save money in the end, because your planner's going to be able to point you in the right direction, more so than Google's going to be able to. So. All right. Well,
Yeah. Well, and there's
awesome.
not a lot of realism in the TikTok and the Pinterest and the Instagram. Like,
Yeah.
though a lot of people don't know how much goes into that. And so,
Hmm.
that's a lot of the time our first conversation that we have is like that vision, and then bringing it to reality. What can we actually
Hmm.
do with what you have, and actually be very creative with it? Uh, I might not know how to make like a table number, but I can find a resource for you of somebody who can
Right.
for your winter wonderland wedding.
Exactly. Give you just what you want. So that's amazing. Well, thank you so much for taking some time to chat with me today. I know we have a special offer for any of our guests that do listen to the podcast. Sholeh said she could offer $100 off any of her planning services. Just mention that you saw her on Eventful Endeavors, and definitely check her out. I feel like I actually forgot. I mean, we'll obviously share the name of your company, but it's Sholeh Events is the name of her business, and this is Sholeh, of course, herself. Anything else you think is worth people to know before we send you on your merry way?
I hire you guys because that was such an awesome experience, and I had such a blast at that wedding. We worked together, and I wish more weddings were like that, because you get a little jaded sometimes. You're like, oh, it's a
Yeah.
simple thing, but I had such a good time with you guys, and it was so much fun. And I think more people need to have that experience at events. So I hope we get to work together more.
Me too. Oh yeah, it's always so much fun, and I mean, that's why I love it, because, like I said earlier about never getting sick of the different events, I never get sick of just weddings too, because every wedding is different. Work with different people, different tastes in music. So I mean, yeah, it's always just a blast and so much fun. And at the end of the day, I mean, people remember how much fun they have. That's what I always say. So.
Exactly. Thank you so
Ah,
much for your time. I appreciate it.
yes, thank you so much. Well, everyone, once again, this is Mike Sherman with Eventful Endeavors signing off. Have a great day, and we will talk to you all soon. Bye. Thanks for listening to another episode of Eventful Endeavors, Secrets to Crafting the Perfect Celebration. We hope to have left you with some actionable ideas for your own event. If you like the show, please subscribe and definitely leave us a review. We read every comment. So until next time, happy planning and see you soon on Eventful Endeavors.